I'm Edmund Janiger, and I'm the Vice President of the Center for Media and Peace Initiatives. It is a pleasure to be here today to bring forth our conference co-chairs and to welcome all of you, our speakers, participants, and audience for this 8th annual Gershowitz Conference organized jointly by the Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration and the Center for Media and Peace Initiatives. Let me turn the floor over to Dr. Robert Schick, who is a SPA-affiliated faculty member and the conference co-chair. Dr. Schick has been a major senior administrator in the New York Metropolitan, in the New York City government, and serves in several editorial boards of academic journals. Dr. Schick, the floor is yours.
Let me start again.
Okay.
Okay.
He's there.
My name is Bob Schick, and I'm an affiliated faculty member at Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration. I would like to welcome you to the conference today. This should be a very interesting, challenging, and certainly topical conference on disinformation in the media. And what we have done, how topical this is as of today, there were 140,000 cases of COVID in the United States and over 1,400 deaths in the United States. This conference will bring together many people from different countries, from different areas of expertise to explore the issues about this. I would also like to mention Dr. Michael Gershowitz, who the conference is named after. He was a beloved colleague and friend who was a journalist and also an academic in public administration. And this conference and the whole series, this is the 8th conference in his name, is dedicated to his memory. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the day ahead.
So let me now turn, thank you, Dr. Schick, for those remarks. And let me now turn the floor over to Dr. Uchenna Ekwo, who is president of the Center for Media and Peace Initiatives and the conference co-chair. He is a distinguished educator and a preeminent leader in the field of journalism.
Thank you very much, everyone. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you. And particularly our keynote speaker today, Congressman Klein. We're so much privileged to have you in our midst.
It is a special honor and privilege to introduce a major leader in bipartisanship, my friend and mentor, our keynote speaker, Congressman Herbert Klein. Congressman Klein is a role model for working together, as we say in America, on both sides of the aisle. It is important to note that Congressman Klein's wife, Jacqueline Krieger Klein, of blessed memory, was an avid community leader and a Democratic National Committee member. Together, they shared an interest in the common good and an unbreakable bond of love. Recently, Congressman Klein established the Herbert and Jacqueline Krieger Klein Alzheimer's and Dementia Clinical Research and Treatment Center, based at Rutgers University, as well as other related components, also based there. Congressman Klein was born and raised in New Jersey, graduating with highest honors from one of 9 surviving colonial colleges, Rutgers University, and entered into another surviving colonial college, namely Harvard University, graduating with a Juris Doctor from its law school. He has had a distinguished career in law, in business, and in politics. He is a friend and backer of our president-elect. During his tenure in the United States Congress, Congressman Klein has played key roles in legislation involving industry branch banking and the reestablishment of the financial integrity of the savings and thrift industry. Earlier, Congressman Klein served in the New Jersey General Assembly, and he was the Associate Majority Leader. Congressman Klein is part of the President's Council of Rutgers University, and he has served on its board of trustees as well as board of overseers. He is a member of the Chairman's Council of the National Democratic Institute, and I would like everyone to join me in honoring and welcoming our keynote speaker, Congressman Herbert Klein. And let me see if Dr. Ekwo is able to reconnect before we return to Congressman Klein.
Want me to Evan, do you want me to start or wait for Dr. Recco?
Maybe let's give him a minute to connect.
Okay.
Nice. Maybe if you'd like to begin, maybe that'd be a good time, and then we can return to Dr. Echo right after your remarks.
So, good morning, everyone, and Edmund, thank you very, very much for those kind words, and particularly for your remembrance of my wife, Jacqueline of blessed memory. Congratulations to you and to all of you for organizing this very outstanding Gershowitz Conference this year. I want to talk to you this morning about the importance of fact and truth in running our government and our political system. I grew up in an era when truth was vital to our society and our national discourse and was universally accepted as such. A time when there was a clear line between facts and what we would like those facts to be. May I digress for just a moment and come back to a different era, an era ending in 1994. At that time, I had the privilege of serving in the US Congress, and the relationship between Democrats and Republicans was outstanding. That was a time when we worked together, we were friends together, and we played together. For example, it was my practice if another member had a birth in the family, was a Democrat or a Republican, I sent a gift. It was a recognition of friendship. That's the way Congress functioned. That relationship enabled us to work together effectively and get things done. We also accepted the true facts and debated our policy differences with a common acceptance of that fundamental truth. America's experienced greatness America experienced greatness in that era when members of Congress accepted the truth and the facts and debated policy based upon those fundamental facts. As we all know, that situation no longer exists today. It has all changed, and it changed in the year 1995. From 1995 on, that clear line between fact and truth has gradually been blurred and has blurred, that blurring has continued consistently until about 4 years ago, when it became a matter not just of blurring but the line disappeared completely. And in the past 4 years, we have unfortunately had that sad experience. Today, certain branches of the media have virtually disregarded truth as a standard. And for some political leaders and a substantial part of the public, they too have refused to recognize fact, but instead have followed their own version of fact. I cite a few examples of areas in which our nation's leadership has refused to accept well-established scientific fact. On climate change, one. Another example is in our dealing with the pandemic from which our nation and the world now suffers. There are countless other areas and subjects in which there is a refusal in big matters and in small matters, a refusal by some to accept established fact and truth, and instead those persons have created their own version of fact. Unfortunately and sadly, as truth has suffered, so also our nation has suffered and suffered seriously. The recent presidential election has brought us to a crossroad, and the coming years will determine whether we will follow the right path, the path of relying upon truth and facts, or whether we will follow a path of creating or being dominated by each one's individual version of fact. I believe that it is essential to our nation and the future of our nation that we must pursue the path of honoring true fact. It is critical to our future success. Much of the Gershowitz Conference program is devoted to a consideration of some of these issues, of the significant presence of disinformation, which has dominated much of our colloquy. The question now is whether we should continue to be guided and controlled by misinformation and disinformation as we have been in recent years, or whether we shall now return to the right path and be guided by truth and solid facts. It is that latter path that made this country great. And it is that path we must and should follow to continue toward future greatness. The task is not an easy one. The results of the election show that much of our nation supports a different version what is true, a different view. Whether our now divided nation will accept the vital importance of truth in pursuing our conduct and our policies in the future is absolutely vital. It is encouraging President-elect Joe Biden is committed to the importance of truth in pursuing this new path. With his energy, his leadership, and his determination, I believe that we as a nation will succeed and will be successfully pursue the path of honoring, respecting, and being guided by fundamental truths. And I again salute the people who have organized this Gershowitz Conference, provided us with the opportunity to continue to explore this critical issue.
Congressman Klein, thank you very much for those incredibly let me now turn the floor over again to Dr. Uchenna Ekwo, who I believe also has some like to say a few words if possible, if the connection is back.
Yeah, I believe, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me, okay. So thank you, Honorable Klein, for that insightful speech. Like I was saying just before we had this hit, I was talking about the whole essence of CMPI, so to speak, in terms of how journalists do have a critical role to play in peace building, in conflict mitigation, and not just in conflict prevention, also in management and resolution as well. Because I always tell students, for example, that, yeah, much as part of journalism is fixated in conflict and drama, like they teach you things like when a dog bites a man, it's no news, but when a man bites a dog, that is news. And when it bleeds, it leads. These are basic axioms in journalism that seem to suggest that journalism is all about oddities, covering unusual things and all that. But at the same time, the reporter also owes it a duty to be able to help not to inflame passion, not to really cause division. And like I was saying a short while ago, the time we live today is a good example of when journalists really can help to bring down the temperature of division, a temperature of paralysis and social dislocation that seem to be part of our lives today. So most of the time, some of our conferences, look at the intersection of the media and public policy, because even though most public officials like Congress the president, they all help to set agenda, but the media itself also plays a role in setting the agenda itself and making people to understand, okay, this is what people are more interested in and all that. Yeah, the media do not always get it right, but at the same time, they do have a role to play. And in doing that, they also must recognize that it's better for us to continue to have exchange of views rather than creating a situation where we support policy of violence and all that. I'm often reminded of what happened during the Iraq War, or the event that led to the Iraq War. Most news organizations got it wrong, and that was about when we started thinking about setting up this organization. Even New York Times had to apologize to its readers that they got it wrong. They didn't, hold the government accountable enough, and they all sold the war to the public on falsehood. So just like today, if you discover the emergence of fact checkers in journalism are also part of that effort to make journalism more socially relevant and more focused to truth telling, which is what journalism should be all about. And we're also glad that we have this association with Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration, because at the end of the day, universities are supposed to be citadels that encourage people to tell the truth, because research is all about fact finding and all that. So that is why we are doing this thing together, and we hope that in more years and because of our research and our work, especially our recently launched Journal for Media and Public Policy, where we intend to crystallize some of the issues we discuss in conferences like this and other training programs that we undertake, to really showcase to the public how we can bring about change in this area. We're not naive thinking that we're going to solve the problems, but this is just our own contribution to knowledge, our own contribution to research and the general populace to understand that much as everybody is talking about the media, or you hear things like fake news and all that, most leaders talk about fake news when the news may not favor them, but it's not fake when they're being praised and all that. And the sad thing about the sole rhetoric about, or the anti-media rhetoric, is that somehow it's damaging the trust of people, that they have on the media. Because even all the dictators around the world are jumping on this phrase of fake news is fake news. There has always been, a sloppiness in journalism in the past. People make mistakes. We know this concept of yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is all about fake news. It has always been there. But leaders today want to demonize the media. Some even call the media enemy of the people. Nothing can be further from the truth. And I associate myself with the publisher of New York Times, who once told even the presence of President Bush that to demonize the media is no good, because free press, an independent press, an accountable press is the greatest export of the United States to the world. And any attempt to damage that will really be very terrible to the advancement of democracy and even equity and all the things we desire in a functional democracy. So having said that, I will hope that we will join everyone to say thank you for joining us. And we have also made this program in such a way that after some of the initial panel discussion, we're going to have a Q&A and take a break and come back for the second panel. Thereafter, we will end for the day and, of course, continue tomorrow. The good thing about this technology is that it makes it easier for people to join from wherever they are, because today we have people from all continents of the world, honestly. And this will have been more difficult because in the past 8 years or so, we've always had in-person conferences. This is the first time we're having a virtual conference. And COVID-19 is honestly exposing a whole lot of things. We're all trying a lot of things. You can imagine I was speaking and all of a sudden the thing shut down and all that. So we're all experimenting face-to-face, even all our classes, online classes and all that. So this is a new environment. And this new environment also poses some challenges. And that is why we are focusing on the challenges of disinformation at this period of time, because people can always exploit crisis to their own advantage. And way of exploiting it could also be how to manipulate information. Today, we have so much debts. We have so many theories about how to deal with COVID-19. And unfortunately, some leaders are also helping to exacerbate the whole misinformation and disinformation campaign. Because when I call it disinformation, is purely because some of them are very deliberate. There's a difference between when somebody deliberately misinforms or when as opposed to when somebody makes a mistake and says something that he or she will later realize is incorrect, and also send an apology and say, oh, I made a mistake. So that is where we are today. And I'm sure all of you are witnesses to all these plethora of disinformation campaigns going around from followers and leaders as well. So it's incumbent in all of us to begin to think about how to really discover the truth and use our brain. Like one of the speakers will be speaking on creative thinking. You know, how are we able to decipher somehow for ourselves, you know, what is my bias towards a particular thing? You know, this is my echo chamber that I live in. Why don't I listen to the other side of the story? Like in this country, for example, just like the president-elect talks about, we should not see ourselves as enemies, even if we are opponents. We can disagree, you know, to agree, you know. So nothing is, we should not just draw this line between we and them, because at the end of the day, we're all members of one human family. And the news media is supposed to bring all these members of the family together, whether you're in the north, the south, east, or west. I've also said one time, I quoted Williams when he addressed the bicentennial anniversary of the oldest school of journalism in the United States in Missouri, where he talks about the importance of journalism. I'm going to end with that story. It looks naive, but there is some story to it, where he said that journalism is the most important profession in the world. And everyone was like, how come? His rationale was that when all of us die and we go to heaven, we do not need a house in God's kingdom, because everyone will be accommodated in God's mansion, right? We don't need military leaders because there won't be war in heaven. When we don't need doctors because nobody's going to be sick. We don't even need lawyers because there is no case in court, right? We don't need policemen because order is, of course, the first law in heaven. There's going to be law and order in heaven. He listed all the different professions, architects. We don't need them, but we need a journalist, because those who live in northern part of heaven want to know what is happening in the south. And those who live in the west want to know what's happening in the east. So it looks naive, but the bottom line is that the journalist, you know, or the communication is the heartbeat of society. So it has that galvanizing, that gluing effect. And that is what we want to espouse, hoping that practitioners and all of us in consuming information should have that at the back of our mind, that we're all members of one family, and advance peace as much as possible. Thank you so much. I yield to Edmund.
Yes, thank you for those remarks, Dr. Echo. And once again, a huge thank you to Congressman Klein for his incredibly important keynote address. Now we will move forward to our first panel. Very much we'd like to welcome the family of Dr. Michael Gershowitz, and this is the memorial to him, this conference, and it's a very cordial welcome to the family, and we're delighted you're able to join us to honor Dr. Gershowitz.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Hi, this is Tova Gershowitz, Mrs. Michael Gershowitz, and I'm sorry, I'm appearing under Gabriel, my son's name, and I wasn't prepared to speak, so I am going to just say thank you for all of this. I miss, Michael passed away in December of 2014. And I have to tell you, in these perilous times, I miss him so much, his wise counsel, his company, him being here to share what's been happening both over the last 4 months and over the last week. It is almost unfathomable for me to think of what is happening in America today. And I just wish he were here. And I'm trying to piece things together. I'm glad that this conference will try to help me and others piece some of the things together that are so extraordinary. I'm not prepared to speak now, but I want to tell you everything Michael lived for was for peace and justice and truth. And many a day I said, what would my Michael say if he were here now to be watching the news and thinking about, as I said, what I consider a perilous moment in America's democracy. Thank you guys, though, very much. And hopefully Gabriel will be able to join us in a few minutes. Okay, he just joined. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Praying for America and the world.
Amen. Gabriel is on.
It says that he joined, but I can't see. No, it looks like it's not Gabriel. He's still on a work call, a conference call. I'm so sorry. Continue, please.
Fatia is on the line. Can you join? Can you go ahead? Can
Yeah,
Gabriel
of
join?
course. Okay.
Okay, Fatia, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Fatia Dakhni. I'm a journalist from Al Masri Al-Yawm newspaper. It is the first independent newspaper in Egypt. It issued in 2004. I will speak today about media and misinformation and how media affected by misinformation. So we live now in an era with a misleading uncertainty. And so what happened? What make this happen and make us live in this kind of uncertainty era? I will speak a little bit about my experience as a journalist. I started work at 20 years ago. When I started work, I remember that I'm going to cover an event maybe at night and return back home, sleep, and return back to work. I went to work the next day to suggest the story about the event was last night and take a proof from my editor to write a story about it. Then I wrote it and it will be published in the next day. So people used to read a story, our news story about something happened 2 days ago in today's edition. So I think this is a big change in media because that wasn't the case anymore now, because anyone with a smartphone can publish a story once it happened. So that is a big change between what happened before and what we used to do and what we are doing right now. So social media change and internet changed the space or the landscape of media. The big difference, I say, there is no gatekeeper anymore. Before, as a journalist, even politician or anyone, he need to go through a gatekeeper. We need a proof to publish our stories. So we need to double check to make it accurate, to make it fulfill with the journalism ethics and vice versa. But now you can just do with one click. You can just go and publish your story to the audience everywhere. So this is a big change now because there is no double check. There is no you cannot sure is it accurate or not. So this is a big change in media landscape, and this gives the individuals a tool to publish their own stories, to be a source of news. and without follow rules or ethics or standards as we are as a journalist working. So, and this may give them, I think they open a channel for extremist conspiracy theories and other find their way and to publish their messages and communicate with millions and hundreds, thousands of people without any rules and without any ethics. I hear my echo. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Did you hear me well? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, maybe this is the change in media. So I think that digital media and social platforms do play a big role in this uncertainty world and this in misinformation and this and information disorder we are facing right now. I will speak about some studies that said why this happened, why fake news are spreading so much, because I think fake news is more attractive. There is a studies by MIT in 2019 said that fake news or false news 70% more likely to be retweeted on Twitter than the truth, and reach their first 1,500 people 6 times faster. So fake news are attractive. It attracts more people than truth. Maybe I remember what Dr. Eco said a while ago when he said that we studied that when a man, when a dog bites a man, this is not a news, but when a man bites a dog, this is a news. And I think that give fake news a little bit spicy. It had their spices, so it attract more people and make them spread a lot between people. And we see this, even politicians now are using social media to spread misinformation, not just ordinary people, not just individuals. So we found that we have an example now in US election and in COVID-19. And we and there's another study said that health misinformation on Facebook was viewed 3.8 billion times in the past year, and then the peaking time was COVID-19, according to research by activist group Avaz. Facebook posed a major threat. Avaz said that Facebook was a major threat to public health because only 16% of this 3.8 billion views was labeled as misinformation. And but social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter are trying to do a role to fight misinformation by labeling this information about, especially about COVID-19, and now we see it in the US presidential election. And Facebook said that he labeled 98 million pieces of COVID-19 misinformation and removed about 7 million pieces of content from April to June 2019, and tried to lead or directed over 2 billion people to resources from health authorities. But we're still facing a lot of misinformation about, especially about COVID-19, about everything, and we are in infodemic. That's why I think United Nations launched a campaign last June to pause and think before reshare any news on social media platform. I'll speak a little bit about Egypt. Our government in 2018 said that they in 3 months they are fighting 21,000 rumors. And during the COVID-19, there was many rumors and theories about the spread of this virus and spread in social media, like the virus will be called, the heat will kill the virus, and Egyptian sun will fight the virus, and there is no virus at all. It is just a conspiracy to destroy Egypt. and some of people are publishing stories about traditional Egyptian food that fighting coronavirus or COVID-19. So there is a lot of misinformation, even while our as a media and government are trying to fight, and even social media platform, but there is a lot of misinformation again, because as I said, it is more attractive, and there is no rules that determine who publish and when and what to publish on this media platform. So I will, what we can do yani, to solve this problem. I think that media literacy is playing, it is an important issue right now, and I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people, or many people I know around me and everywhere, are trying to study what is media literacy. It is more important. We try in Egypt now to make it to teach media literacy at school, to teach media literacy at universities, because it is, we think it is important to give people tools to understand what is published, and to check the stories before they share it, to know what is real and what is not real. But I think also this traditional media should play a big role here, because we need to stop following the trends and to get more traffic, because what I think the main problem now we are facing is, I don't know about you, but it is in Egypt, every website, a news website and newspaper are following what is published on social media platform, because it is trendy, and it will attract more audiences and more readers, and so they follow it. And sometimes we publish the stories that isn't right at all, and discover after we publish it that this isn't right, because we follow what we saw and what we read on social media platform. So I think there is a big role here on media or journalism to rethink and try to do what we learned already. We need to do what we learned, to check the story, to recheck it again, and to make sure that it is accurate, and not follow just a trend and the traffic, because this will make us lose our credibility. And there is many studies right now say that the trust in media was declined more and more. So, and when Egypt, I think this is we have an old say about media and newspaper. We said it is all what is published in media is in Arabic kalam garaid. It is just a newspaper talk, and it is not right. It is not right. So we need to regain our credibility by fulfill the ethics and values of journalism, and not follow the trend, and make sure that our stories is accurate, balanced, and not biased. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those remarks, and we will return to you as part of our question and answer period. But let us now turn to Shakira Amin, who I believe is joining us, has been able to join us. Let's see.
Or you can join Gabriel if she's not ready. Gabriel will make some few remarks. Okay, Shakira is on, okay. You can take on Gabriel, then later on Shakira.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the conference. My name is Gabe Gershowitz, the son of Dr. Michael Gershowitz, who the conference is graciously named after. And I've had the pleasure of joining the conference for the past, I think, Dr. Ekwo, 6-7 years now. And I just want to say a couple of words more from the heart, not so much on the topic and substantively the way that the scholars and experts will, but just a little bit about my father. My father, whose birthday is coming up November 20th, was actually born on the same exact day as Joe Biden, the president-elect. and would have been very much intrigued by what's happened in our world politically and in terms of media, communications, and public policy over the past several years. The work that Rutgers School of Public Affairs and CMPI have been doing is making a real difference for good in the world and would have made my father very, very proud. And so I just want to say thank you to all of the participants. Thank you, Dr. Ekwo, for inviting me and for keeping my family. I see my mother is on. I believe my uncle and my sister are listening in as well, and other people will be joining throughout the duration of the conference. Just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to support Rutgers and CMPI and this conference in particular, and all of the good work that you're doing, which matters more perhaps right now than ever in our history as Americans. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being on for the parts of the conference when I can, when work allows. And I will go back on mute now, and looking forward to hearing from other folks later today. And I would also just end with, I see Congressman Klein on. My father was a veteran of the National Guard. I know you're a veteran, so happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service.
Let us now turn the floor over and exactly happy Veterans Day to Congressman Klein and all other veterans. Congressman Klein is a lieutenant, if I remember correctly.
Thank you.
So let us turn this back to Shahira Amin, the CNN contributor and former deputy head of Now TV, joining us from Cairo.
Thank you very much, Edmund. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I will be brief, and I just want to say that at the onset, I want to say that fake news didn't start with social media. It existed long before. Just think of all the propaganda churned out by public broadcasters to serve the interests of a certain group or government. And yet, because many people spend a lot of time on social media, whether to get the latest news or information, the importance of social media in spreading fake news can't be overemphasized. Now, we encounter false or misleading information on a near daily basis just by scrolling our news feeds. And because social media is a public platform, anyone can post anything without being held accountable. Even news organizations do it without being held to account. So before anything, we must distinguish between the two kinds of fake news. There's, of course, misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is unintentional. It could be a hoax. It could be a conspiracy theory. It could be a fabricated report, even satire. I'll give you an example. There's this cartoon of President-elect Joe Biden, bearded and in Salafi garb, and raising the hand gesture of Rabah to express solidarity with the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a cartoon that was published in the local papers here to spread misinformation, but I believe that's deliberate. So any misleading content that is published deliberately, then that is, of course, disinformation. And I would say that there is a lot of it happening in today's polarized world. Our societies are polarized. So there's a lot of this disinformation that is being used in the media war. Also, I want to advise our viewers today on how to spot fake news. I would say that always trust your gut feeling. If you find something that is too outrageous or too ridiculous to be true, then it probably isn't true. And we need to go back and check. Also, if it's biased in favor of one party, then it's likely not to be correct. And also, we have to look at who is posting this news. Does that person have a track record of dishonesty? Is he a reputable person? We all have our biases, but it's very important to look for a variety of sources sharing the same news, not just any sources, but of course credible ones. What are they saying on the topic? And we need to do that to get the complete picture. If something inspires strong emotion, say it makes you laugh, or it makes you cry, or it makes you sad, if it evokes strong emotional responses, then it tends to spread much faster. And we need to, it may be a sign that we need to do a quick fact check then. Why do people do it? Well, some of those who want to foment unrest or spread disinformation, they often use emotionally driven content to plant their seed. But we've also seen friends on Facebook post information that isn't correct. And I'm sure that they didn't do it deliberately. Like a friend the other day posted that a certain store closes at 7 when it actually closes at 8. And I shared it without checking. And it turned out to be untrue. That, of course, was not deliberate. And what you do when you share information that is not true, then you don't just delete it. As a journalist, you have a responsibility to go back, apologize, say why, and also share the correct information. Now, that is how you build your credibility. We also have to watch out for those sponsored ads because they're trying to bait you into buying their stuff. So not all the information they publish is 100% accurate. Don't believe all what you read about those miraculous drugs that will make you lose weight overnight. And I think if also in fact-checking, we look into the publisher, but also they sometimes attribute news to a news site. So we check the web address. Does it really exist? If the link is broken, then it's not there. Also, a lot of sources publish anonymously, and that can be a sign of misleading news. Grammatical errors is another sign, or if the sources are not reflected properly. For instance, I know that person, and I know he wouldn't say such a thing. Sorry. Okay. I would also recommend that you always be thorough and cautious before you post. You should be careful not to isolate a certain group with your posts on social media, because that happens very often. We saw it with this American presidential race with Biden versus Trump, and supporters of both trying to spread disinformation about the candidates they oppose. We also, as Fathia mentioned, we saw it with COVID-19, all the fake cures. And in Egypt, we see it every day with a lot of disinformation about the Muslim Brotherhood, designated as a terrorist group here, but also with Muslim Brotherhood websites. So it happens on both sides. As Fathia said, that as journalists, we have a responsibility in doing our homework, in doing our research before sharing. Fact checking, I can't overemphasize that. And identifying fake news. If, as I said earlier, it sounds unreasonable. But also, we need to build our media literacy, our ability to critically analyze the media that we consume for bias and accuracy, to distinguish between fact and fiction. The internet has given us all a voice. Let's use it to spread truth, not misinformation. Thank you.
Dr. Olga Zverskaya is the president of the Institute for Creative Thinking. So let us see if we're able to connect.
I think she is.
I'm here.
Okay. We can hear you, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello. Can you see me too?
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone. It's such an honor to be here today, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak. This is a very important conference, and we have experienced challenging times, and I would like to talk about infusing creative thinking into recharge emotions during crisis and filtering information. I work for Us Creative. We are a training and coaching company that provides comprehensive tools and training and workshops and consultations on creative problem solving, professional growth, and success. We deal with people from diverse cultural background, economic background, different mentalities, and during crisis, we all experience confusion and sometimes anxiety. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to think. We don't know what to believe. And therefore, creative thinking is very important, especially during challenging times. And in today's presentation, I would like to talk about the role of creative thinking in perception of information and recharging emotions during crisis. And I'll share some techniques of filtering information from the perspective of creative thinking during uncertain times. I'll also emphasize our company experience of supporting healthcare providers during COVID-19 by helping them to recharge, because a lot of people were saying, and we have seen it all, that our healthcare providers were struggling as well as patients because they worked long hours. They were worried about their patients as well as about their own family members and so on. So first of all, let's start from discussing creative thinking. So researchers identify creative thinking as the ability to respond to a situation in terms of fluency, flexibility, originality, elaboration, resistance to premature closure. It's all very important, and it does matter when it comes to perception and thinking. So we all know that creative thinking helps us channel and rechannel uncertainty, for example, and frustration into curiosity and originality. And also new ideas and confidence, which is extremely important when we need to keep going and perform well. And in contemporary society, creative thinking actually is viewed as a survival skill in a complex environment. It's the capacity to transform, let's say, environmental input into some valuable output. And infusing creative thinking is important in practically everything, from improving emotional health to empowering people to succeed. So also establishing a supportive environment and learning various techniques or tools or mechanisms of creative thinking are vital resources. And that's something I would like to emphasize in today's presentation. Good to know that creative thinking is a trait which can be improved through practical exercises. Some people say, I'm not creative. I was not born creative. So as a matter of fact, it's not true. We all are born creative. And like I said, through practical exercises and a little bit of persistence, we all can reach our higher potential. So we can rewire our brain to boost our natural ability to deal with crisis. And creative thinking results from infusing different characteristics that I have mentioned today that allow the mind to perceive, filter, think in the different directions, and make better decisions. So let's focus a little bit on COVID-19 times and situation and what was happening to the way people perceive and think and analyze information. So COVID-19 and other crises threaten our ability to think along with physical and mental health. So people experienced loss of confidence, identity, family members, security, income, etc. And the stress generated fear, anxiety, grief, despair, and other negative feelings. So overwhelming demands, lack of support, and conflict reduce confidence and the ability to think. In order to reduce the burnout, it's important to understand the circumstances and analyze information and make better decisions and recharge emotions, of course, because when we are down, when we are overwhelmed and anxious, again, we cannot think straight. We're not able to make decisions. We're not able to make good choices. So due to unexpected nature of crisis, any crisis is unexpected, and it is important to acknowledge uncertainty and ambiguity. It's very important to be able to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity for creative thinking. So people reacted differently to COVID-19 crisis. Many of them were devastated by listening to the continuous reports about the virus outbreaks and other issues. Again, it's important to gain certain techniques of filtering information as well as recharging emotions during challenging times. So we perceive the world around us based on our own interpretation of patterns of information, and creative thinking actually assists in the process of changing perspectives and filtering information, as well as creating new meaning. Creative thinking helps also to classify between facts and misinformation and disinformation and rumors that cause distress and confusion. And also creative thinking helps to detect and filter inaccurate or, let's say, unwanted data content via either semantic or psychological or investigative approach, which is based on our own research and compare and contrast and analyzing skills and so on. So I want to provide a few tips to filter information, how to filter information, so anyone can use it. So first, it's great to develop a plan for monitoring and analyzing information. It's good to choose reliable sources, like many people already have mentioned today, collect, process, analyze. You need to mind ownerships, profit orientation, credibility of sources, check multiple news sources for the same story, and also be aware of selective perception, which is a psychological term, and information overload, because I believe a lot of people get overloaded with the amount of information and their mind is not able to simply process it and analyze it, and it's too much. So we have to be sometimes a little more skeptical. We have to be reasonable and, of course, analytical. So it's good to create a checklist to compare data and also critically analyze it. And it's good to know the facts that help reduce stress rather than focus on rumors. It's great to focus on a real fact. So again, minimize informational overload, sometimes distinguish between news and infotainment, balance judgment and analysis. Also, communication dynamic is extremely important. It's good to understand that. And sometimes do a reverse image search, check the date of publication, like a few journalists have mentioned today, spot and disregard rumors that are covered with either graphs or numbers or algorithms and other statistics. So interact and communicate with first responders, because it's great to get information from people that are actually dealing with a situation. So our company, Ascrita, was doing this during COVID. We have communicated a lot with healthcare providers, and as a result, we even got so flexible that we have changed a little bit. We used our own creative thinking and we have changed our activities, and I will share a little bit with you in today's presentation. So also it's good to use creative thinking and good judgment to inform opinions when we are under stress, and also classify information, compare, contrast, postpone evaluation, postpone judgment, and adopt new attention patterns, which is great tool for creative thinking. So be aware that filtering perception and peer pressure can also cause only wanted parts of the message to be received. It's very important to make sure that we receive the entire message, and then we work with this whole information. So think flexibly to turn the challenges into attainment and establish a mind-friendly and welcoming environment. And here I would like to share our experience, what we have done during this COVID-19. So by researching all this information and getting valuable input from our journalists, we have learned that a lot of healthcare providers are going through a very tough time. And when healthcare providers are so stressed, they cannot take care of themselves, they cannot take care of their patients. And we decided to step in and help our honorable healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, medical assistants that work so hard in New York hospitals, and some of them work 20 hours and so on. So we want them to perform better and to take a better care of their patients. And we decided to help them and establish a mind-friendly and welcoming environment to loosen the burden and increase performance standards for success. So we already know that people react differently to stressful situations, and fear and anxiety and overwhelming and negative emotions. And as a result, people do experience poor performance and decision-making breakdown and so on. So there are a few tips from us, Krita, creative tips how to recharge emotions generally, because a lot of people were down, and they felt like blue, and they didn't know where and how to get energy and to recharge their emotions. So sometimes you need to really slow down. You have to minimize criticism. No need to really waste your emotional energy on things that don't serve your purposes. So do something you can be proud of. Take a virtual vacation, walk and exercise, outside. A lot of people were doing this during COVID. Build new habits. Don't beat yourself up, because it's very negative, will impact again, and your emotions will go down. Stay compassionate. Try to stay connected. Get enough sleep. Eat healthier. Stay creatively busy. It's important. It saved a lot of people. Set a schedule. Set priorities. Get some assistance. Don't hesitate to get an assistance sometimes. And like I said before, try to create a mind-friendly and welcoming environment. And that's exactly what we were doing. We helped a lot of hospitals and healthcare facilities to create employees recharge rooms. So we donate a lot of mind booster art. Mind booster art is one of our inventions. It's a special art, scientifically based, that create this friendly and welcoming environment. So supportive environment reduces stress and help people to recharge emotions, and also promote feelings of belonging, which is extremely important during crisis. So Mind Booster art was invented to enhance positive human experiences in a multitude of environments by stimulating their mind's pleasure pathway, and specifically to the healthcare settings. And again, let me just share really briefly our experience, how we work with healthcare during crisis by implementing this art and creating a welcoming environment. And again, accurate and filtered information, as well as friendly environment, help people to stay well and help them to recharge their emotions. So based on scientific premise, Mind Booster art demonstrated that it stimulates the senses and elicited positive viewer responses. And positive responses and positive attitude are extremely important for people in order to be able to think creatively, make better decisions, again, filter information and perceive information creatively without getting into like anxiety and nerve breaks and so on and so on and so on. So pretty much the outbursts of mental imagery let go of the traditional thinking patterns and promote creative thinking in people, particularly in healthcare providers. So during these challenging times, actually, it was a big honor for us, for our company, to work with those that saved so many lives and worked with people. So most of you are journalists, and you also always there where you need to be, same like healthcare providers and doctors. And this imagery helped healthcare administrators to build stronger doctor-patients relations and patients cooperation. So pretty much, once again, it's very important to always implement creative thinking and the way you perceive the world in terms of understand what's going on, in terms of filter information, in terms of be able to compare and contrast information. And I just want to share that so many medical professionals reported a better mood and effective communication and sense of comfort and satisfaction and more positive attitude. And for health provider, it's extremely also important to be able to receive information, to compare, to contrast, to analyze, and so on and so on and so on, because only with accurate facts, with accurate information, they're able to save people and save lives. So based on the positive responses from all these healthcare providers, it was clear that our implementation of employees recharge rooms help people tremendously during this difficult time. And we were able to help them to improve healthcare experience, followed by favorable responses from both healthcare providers and patients. So I would like to wish everyone to be creative, and you are doing extremely important things, and you need to be creative yourself and teach your readers and viewers to be creative and to be able to perceive your information correctly and utilize it for their own goods. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sky. Thank you.
I think we should have some question and answer session right now. But I'm not sure whether Gordon is on, Honorable Gordon. Otherwise, because I believe we have a lot of things to unpack, actually. And I see a connection between Fathia's analysis and Shahira as well. A lot of connection, and we also bring into the platform of creativity. And I think Shahira also talked about something related to confirmation bias, how to detect fake news or an attempt by someone to sell you false information. Not just even news, because she also alluded to issues about aggressive advertising and marketing efforts of some individuals. Some of them, everything is roped into the concept of information. So I believe that we can start having some questions. If I may ask Fathia, I think I met Fathia at University College in Dublin in 2011 at the peak of the Arab Spring, and a whole lot of social media role that played a lot of role during that crisis. And today we're still living witness to some of the influence of social media in terms of how even the leaders make use of social media. As a matter of fact, there are some studies that are emerging what they call digital authoritarianism, because you see, we celebrated the Arab Spring, thinking that the social media is able to penetrate and kind of overtake the conventional traditional media to be able to talk to the leaders and usurp the gatekeeper role of the traditional journalists. But today, the leaders have mastered a way of even terrorizing ordinary people, because the whole concept of democratization of information that social media or the internet unleashed in the entire world somehow is being circumvented by the mastery of these leaders in what has come to be known as digital authoritarianism. In other words, you can imagine where, for example, President Trump has almost more than 85 million followers, right? So in that case, that is more than a population of different countries. So, and if people are following him, it's not true though that everyone who follows him believes in what he says. However, he has a commanding control of the psyche of a whole lot of people, some who believe in him, whether he's wrong or not. So, and the same thing is happening all over the country, all over the world. So I want to get the perspective of Fathia, Shahira, and perhaps the creative thinking expert on perhaps, are there ways ordinary citizens can really rise to the occasion of digital authoritarianism by, not necessarily, because it's true we blame the media, but at the same time, most of us are following our leaders one-on-one through the social media, and we tend to believe and act in accordance with what they say in their platforms. All right. So are there ways beyond just even the media? Are there ways we can really determine how not to listen or follow some of these leaders in a sheepish manner? Thank you.
Are you going to start, Shahira? Yeah, me? Okay, I will start. I'll give you an example of something related to what you said. In Egypt now, after 2013, especially after 2011 and what happened in 2013 and Muslim Brotherhood, we have two ways of media, two different kinds of medias. Muslim Brotherhood media, always produced from outside Egypt, and Egyptian, what we call it, government and independent, and not too much independent right now. It's government media. And when you write a story, and this kind of division between media reflect on the audience in the street, because we have division in the street also. People who follow or watch Muslim Brotherhood media trust it, and even if you try to say that they say the wrong information, what they said it is not true, they are not convinced at all, because they are follow this TV stations or media or newspaper or websites, and they totally trust it. On the other hand, people who follow governmental media and pro-CC's media, and also they are trusted and doesn't trust others. So we have this kind of division, and that is reflect also on, if we can, politicians or government, because media now and digital platforms are a tool in hand of authoritarian regimes, on hand of politicians, on hand of governments. We cannot, especially now in Egypt, I told you before that I work in the first independent newspaper in Egypt, but we cannot say independent right now. Shahira will agree with me on this. There is no independent newspaper now, because even you are with us or against us, even you are with the government and support the country, or you are terrorist and support the Muslim Brotherhood. So you are with us or without us, and this is what happened after 2013 right now, and this is the challenge we are facing. So we try to be a good journalist, we try to do our work, but also we try to keep our safety, because if we are criticized too much, you will not, so you will be a terrorist. So this is what the dilemma we are facing right now, and this is what we call it, and as you said, digital authoritization. I'll take the floor.
Can I just add, there's not much to add to what Fathia says, but I just want to add that we have hundreds of news sites blocked in Egypt today, though we cannot access information. That's one thing. Journalists are being arrested and charged with spreading fake news when they haven't even reported the story yet. Just a few weeks ago, we had a journalist arrested when he went to report on a detainee who was brutally killed while in police custody. He had not written his story yet, but he was accused of spreading fake news. Another journalist who went to cover protests in Luxor in September was arrested as soon as she arrived without writing the story. So that's the kind of atmosphere that we have today, just to give you an idea. And lately I've had to write anonymously, which really hurts me, because, you know, when it's your story and you want to have your name on it, but you can't for security and safety reasons, as Fathia says. So it's a very restrictive environment and a very polarized and toxic environment as well. Thank you for your
Okay.
question, though.
Go ahead. I think Edmund, it looks like Mr. Buffer is on. I don't know whether you can have him talk right now as we.
Yes, that
Edmund?
would be great if we can connect. See if Dr. Buffer can hear us.
Hi, I'm here. This is Justin Buffer.
Okay, go ahead, Justin.
Oh, hi. It's so nice to be with all of you and happy Veterans Day. As you might know, you've seen from the brochure, I'm the author of a book on social justice and history. And what I wanted to talk about today was misinformation in history and how it affects the public narrative and voting, because I've seen so much of it. And especially now with the Trump administration and modern conservatism and the media. So I'm going to use a few paradigms in history about that. The first one I'm going to talk about is Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in my mind, a heroic American who did so much good for the world and advanced civil rights. Unfortunately, his image has been co-opted by many in the media and many on the right wing, many of whom he would have never supported. And I think it's important to look at his history as a paradigm. So Dr. King in 1964, he came out against Barry Goldwater for president, calling him a supporter of racist. And Dr. King also was as liberal as they come, even to the left of Bernie Sanders today. And I want to put it in perspective, in the late 90s and even in 2000, even today, many take one line from Dr. King's speech about judging people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, which was something he did say in his 1963 speech, but he said a lot more in that speech. And they use those lines, for instance, people on the right wing today, in my opinion, filmmakers like Dinesh D'Souza. Okay. There we are. Thank you, Dr. Eckwell. Filmmakers like Dinesh D'Souza who make videos and try to present it as if the Ku Klux Klan is associated with the modern Democratic Party, which is a falsehood. That was the old Democratic Party. Things switched after 1964. That's something that I think the congressman, he can attest to. Okay, the party switched roles in that regard and support for segregation. So looking at Dr. King, people in the right wing who have co-opted his image and kind of, they've hijacked his image, and he's just one example of many. They cite those one lines in I Have a Dream speech to act as if Dr. King would have been against affirmative action and quotas, things like that in public university and in public life, when I think that's very far from the truth. There are other examples of this. I talked about the Ku Klux Klan, the Democratic Party, and this is kind of mainstream. I see groups, right-wing groups posting Dr. King's words to support their image, and it horrifies people in his family. I know this because I've talked to people in his family, and they gave me permission to quote his words in my book. They take his stuff out of context in the media, and the media publishes this stuff. He said in 1967 in an interview in Harlem at the Riverside Church, "I saw my dream turn into a nightmare." He had seen the support that he did not get for civil rights after the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. And he is just one example whose image is co-opted. Another one is Social Security. Social Security is a solvent, strong thing that has been strong for Americans since his advent of 1933. Francis Perkins, the Secretary of Labor, whom I wrote about in my book, with the support of Franklin Roosevelt, it is strong as can be. And there are people on the right wing today who co-opt, who hijack history, talk about how it's going bankrupt, how it's been bad, and it's so popular and it's helped so many to keep them in good standing in later life, okay, and live a dignified life in retirement and in old age. And there's so much competition around these things. And this is something I think the congressman, he can attest to as well when he was in Congress as well. Well, I think when Mr. Klein was in Congress, these things were agreed upon on both sides. It was just a matter of the value of Social Security but I don't think it was the facts. Now the facts are in dispute, and there are people who want to use the false information to undo Social Security and the welfare state that's helped Americans since 1933. So, yeah. Is my microphone still on, Dr. Eckel?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Okay, good. So I also, there's books out there called American Amnesia, and great book. I wrote about it in my book. And this is something talked about since 1933, the combination of, after World War II mostly, the combination of the mixed economy between the private sector and the public sector. The partnership that has created so much good in our world, okay, with the public investment in research. And that reality of how much taxpayer funds and that partnership between the public and private sectors has been kind of blinded by, in my mind, the right wing since Reagan, who acted like government was the enemy. And that lie has permeated so much of the right wing, who ironically benefit from so many social programs, the same ones they castigate. Okay, so that partnership is what led to the GI Bill. That partnership between the private and public sector created so much good, including so many advances in healthcare, in medicine, in technology. And today's right wing that has undone and the Trump administration especially, that has used false information and has permeated all over social media, that somehow a government is the enemy and regulation is the enemy, when regulations dating back to Upton Sinclair jungle have helped save lives from poisonous food, from asbestos and other chemicals. And this reality of our history, of how much good a government regulation has done, how much this partnership between a strong capitalist economy and a strong government, how much good it has done. That amnesia, that kind of suppressing by the right-wing media in my mind, and has led to so much disinformation. And I think it's dangerous, especially, but I am hopeful now with the new administration coming in, who has great common sense, I feel, and who's going to be a great leader, I feel, who believes in truth and knows about that partnership, knows how strong it took the combination of the private and public sector to rescue the economy in 2009 when Barack Obama took office, rescuing Detroit. So, President Trump has allowed himself to benefit from the narrative that began with President Reagan when he said in his 1981 inaugural address, the government is the problem. And so many, and even he realized that wasn't going to stick. In 1984, he chose to raise taxes again, and he knew he had to raise income taxes, even though it was not publicly said a lot. Even when President Clinton took office, everyone knows in 1994, I think Mr. Klein mentioned 1995, and the Republican Congress took over Congress. In January of 95, they came with a strong right-wing. It was a strong right-wing agenda, and its goal with the Contract of America was to undo all the stuff in the Great Society. And soon enough, I think Americans came back to the center, and I think they realized that important partnership between the private and public sector. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that today and the importance of knowing our history and fighting back on truth, and how misinformation it can affect public policy. Thank you, Dr. Eckel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butler. I think you have actually crystallized this, because it's not just a matter of the media, because somehow the narrative or the false narrative has been that it's the media that is the center or the architect of misinformation. Quite frankly, the media mirrors society. And like you rightly pointed out, all the way down to the 80s and even before then, there had been this contestation between two different political ideologies and all that. And the media merely reflect what's going on. However, for us to really embrace, some measure of decorum and decency, understanding that truth is important, it behoves on all of us, including practitioners, including politicians as well. Because obviously, if, for example, like we talked about digital authoritarianism, and I'm happy also that the journalist from Egypt, he's also telling us that, because I used to be happy to understand that her publication is the only independent newspaper in Egypt. But like you had her say, there's no independence anymore because the authorities somehow manipulate the system, manipulate information, and if you don't join them, they'll make sure they browbeat you and make sure that you fall in line. Similar things like that also even here, where perhaps if you challenge the authorities, somehow you now become the enemy of the people. You know, I can't imagine that anybody could assume that the media is an enemy to the people. And yet, most of those people who are talking about that rose or became what they are through the arms of the media, as it were. So, but let's open the conversation. If anyone has any questions or comments, that would be welcome, because this is a community of inquiry where we share ideas and learn, and others will also. I recognize there are some people who join through audio. Even if you are having problems with your video, you can still ask questions, or you can also send it through via chat, and we'll announce the question or the comment. So
I have a question. I'd like to know how the COVID virus has been covered in Egypt. In other words, how truthful do you think it is, and what is the situation in Egypt regarding the COVID crisis?
I would like to go first, if that hair would allow me. I would say it's been covered with a great deal of fake news. The statistics, like I believe that today we are seeing the second wave of coronavirus, but that is not being reported. But every family knows people that have, fallen ill or been taken to hospital. The number of deaths are on the rise. That is not being reported because the government believes that economy comes first. So I don't think that we will see it actually announced that we are undergoing this second phase. Also, a lot of people are turning to social media. When you have all those restrictions in place, social media becomes the alternative platform. And that is very, very dangerous, because there as well, we find a lot of misleading information about all those fake cures and the conspiracy theories. And this is what happens when there's a lot of repression and when the space for free expression has shrunk considerably. So it's very hard to get information in Egypt about the real figures, about the number of deaths, about, even it's now the general intelligence controlling the media, and it's a one-voice media. You switch channels and it's the same message on every single news channel. A contrast from what we saw in the United States when President Trump made his final speech, and a lot of networks, just took him off the air. For me, I was in awe of that. I mean, some people might think, allow him to speak, but they felt he was spreading lies, and they took him off the air. Except for Fox News and CNN, they didn't, but a lot of the other networks did.
I want to add something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will add to what Shahira said, that COVID-19 are covered through mommy's group on WhatsApp. So we have, it is a lot of misinformation, a lot of fake news. At the beginning, I remember I met people in the street, and they said to me, they told me there is no COVID-19, there is no coronavirus. It is just a rumor that the government are spread it to Some of them said that the Egyptian government want to take another loan or grant from IMF. So that's why they said there is a coronavirus to get another loan. People said it is just a flu. It is nothing at all. But at the other hand, you know, in mommy's group on WhatsApp regarding school, there is a lot. There is a case here. There is a case there. They speak a lot about a lot of cases, many deaths, and something we are not sure is it right or not, because there is no trustful source for information about COVID-19, even about numbers, as Shahira said, about deaths, about anything, about the second wave also. The government are now going to put their stress on the economy, and I think that we are not going, as Shahira said, we are not calling for another speak about second wave or do another lockdown. Even we didn't did a lockdown in the beginning, but we are not going to do another one or put a restriction on people because of the economy. So that's how we cover it, and we are facing a lot of challenge to find the real source about cases in Egypt, especially. So we are usually depend on WHO to write the stories from their sides, to get information from what happened outside about the vaccine, about the cure on anything. But in Egypt, it is difficult to find a trustful source about COVID-19.
Thank you.
So, any other comment? We're going to take a break and get into the next panel eventually, but I'm sure that Olga, talking about, I don't know what Dr. Basquiat, I don't know whether you're still on, the issue of creativity that you talked about. What is the connection with the suggestions you make in terms of how to filter information? But do you think that people are wired in such a way that they have this doctrinaire principle, you know, inside them, in their brain or something, that somehow, even when they see that something is black and someone tells them this is blue or white, they just stick to that person regardless of anything? For example, if someone has a clip on television that says, "Oh, I said this," and the next day he says, "I didn't say it," and you ask, okay. So my question to Dr. Olga is, how is there a way people are naturally wired to think, regardless of evidence? They refuse to accept evidence and insist on their own version of facts. Because I just believe that if something is white, it is white, it's incontrovertible. But somehow, someone can just want to continue repeating something that is white, say is black, is black, is black. So that in the process, some people will consume such information and I believe that is something that is white, that is black. From your research perspective, are you able to understand why people are, you know, are likely to just ignore basic facts and insist that they are right when they are wrong?
Thank you so much, Dr. Uchenna, for your question. And I'm smiling because one of your wonderful journalists today already have said that people naturally are wired and more attractive to those news that are not 100% correct, because those accurate news, they're usually less colorful. If we speak like artistic language here, I would say more scientific and fact-based and realistic news are more like pastel, you know, like in pastel colors. And those that are like created and exaggerated, they are vivid and screaming out colors, and they are more attractive. And people, we all are creatures of habits, right? And it's so hard to rewire our brain, to rewire. We all perceive the world around us based on our own interpretation of those patterns of information. So we are wired to certain patterns, right, of information, to certain patterns of what's going on around us and everything. And of course, like that mind booster art that I have mentioned, people are attractive to those images because they are so vivid, they're so colorful, they are screaming out, right? So instead of take time, step back and thinking a little bit about what's true, what's not true, we just kind of, it's catchy, so we take it, and then because of anxiety and fear and all of those emotions that we have at the moment, instead of just stepping back and analyzing and comparing and contrasting, we just kind of exaggerate it a little bit more because we're full of emotions, we're full of those feelings, and we kind of pass it. So it's all contagious. It's kind of happen naturally, a human nature, that's how it works. Natural explorers, you don't have to be a scientist. Some people just naturally have it, they embrace it. So instead of just taking this information and spreading it and exaggerating, they're saying like, hold on a second, so let me check it out first, let me compare it, let me check how reliable this source is, and so on and so on and so on. But again, like I said, creative thinking, it's a skill, it's a habit. So it's just very hard to rewire our brain, and we get wired, we get used to something. And first, it's a very flexible wiring, because like there is such term as brain plasticity, right? It's possible to change some of our habits and think thorough and so on, but it's hard, it takes time. Instead, where we are under stress, we're not great thinkers, we're not wired to analyze, to compare, to contrast. Also, overload of information kinds of interacts with this thoughtful feedback and everything. So if you calculate how many sources of information per hour an average person received during crisis, it's overload and it's overwhelming. So no brain is able to filter it right, to understand it right. So that's why all of those factors, unfortunately, negatively impact the way we perceive information. A lot of people just natural exaggerators, there is no such word, they exaggerate it naturally. It makes them feel more important, and before they receive the full message, they already start calling and texting and posting on social media. Oh, do you know that this and this? Also pictures that do not actually reflect the entire situation. It's like taken out of content. You know, it's all important. And like I said, I gave just a few, like let's say 25 tools how to filter information, how to calm down, how to slow down. It's good for emotional health also, not only for the sake of accuracy and receiving, but unfortunately a lot of people, they get into this whole rash situation. They just grab information here and there. They creatively, I say creatively in a bad content now, because it's like exaggerating, and they mix in this information. They, pass it, and every time information gets skewed. There is a great example, a psychological game, when people just stay in a line and you give a message, you whisper to the first person something, and that person has has to whisper the same message to another person. So it's a research base, and everyone knows by the time it gets to, I don't know, number 20 person, it's a whole skewed and a completely different and accurate message. That's how human nature is. That's how our perception works. And we perceive it wrong, and then we convey it double wrong, and that's how it goes. So we need to actually embrace, we need to develop certain skills. We need to learn how to slow down, how to be able perceive information correctly and accurately, analyze, compare, contrast. And unfortunately, we all are used to multiple choices in school and everything. So multiple choices not exactly develop this ability to analyze, compare, contrast. So we have to be exposed to some other ways of learning, and something that would help us to embrace this ability to compare, contrast, analyze, and pass information in a very accurate way and sensitive way, so we don't hurt anyone else, so we don't hurt anyone's feelings, and so on and so on and so on.
May I just add to that, always be skeptical and to always question what we hear and read. And that's very important, because, you know, a lot of people just accept things for what they are, and usually they're not what they are.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question to, hello? Can you hear me? I wanted to ask the keynote speaker a question in the context, giving his own experience in Congress and what is happening today. And I understand, or we have all witnessed, like the shifts in alliances or allegiances as well, in terms of sometimes Republicans will do stuff that favor them. Of course, Democrats will do the same thing. And the next year or next round, they criticize the other one for doing what they have done in the past and all that. So there seems to be a pattern of trench war trenches, you know, within Congress. And the thing is not helping much. There's so much acrimony, there's so much division that has become worse today. Put in context, compared with your own period in Congress and what is going on today, we have these no labels caucus that have tried to see if they can build bridges, but it's not happening. Nothing is working. So there's so much paralysis, and it's impacting the growth of democracy and our growth as a nation. A lot of worthy and good
Dr. Echo, we've lost you for
I can't hear you, Dr. Echo.
Okay. In your view, I'm asking the question to Honorable Herbert Klein, the former congressman. What is the best way to really break the gridlock that seems to be consuming decision-making in Congress today?
Well, that's a very, very wonderful question. And there are no easy answers. The gridlock has continued for a period of more than 20 years, and it has gotten worse and worse, particularly during the past 4 years of the Trump administration. And when you look at the voting figures, the fact of the matter is that although Mr. President Trump lost the popular vote, he still had the highest popular vote of any candidate for president prior, other than Joe Biden did in this election, which shows that there are an awful lot of people in this country that are committed to ideas that are false ideas that are unsupported by fact. They get it from media that are, there are a number of media stations that simply generate purposely that fact, and it's hard to overcome. The wonderful thing and the good thing is that Joe Biden has a history of 45 years in the US Senate and then thereafter, in which he has been a bridge builder. That is his great talent, his ability to bring people together. And I know he is going to use that talent to try to bring people together. It's not going to be an easy task. It's a very, very difficult task. But I have confidence that over a period of time, we will see a gradual period of cooperation in which two parties and individuals in Congress become more willing to cooperate with one another in order to achieve the ultimate good of the people.
So I was going to ask Mr. Boffa, who spoke eloquently on social justice. One thing that coronavirus has really exposed is the deepening inequality in our society across, especially the marginalized people within the country. You know, the mostly colored people have been disproportionately impacted by the virus, exposing more fundamental health challenges that continues to dog this segment of the population. So in pursuit of social justice, are there some concrete policy ideas that you may recommend for the government to pursue, those in Congress, either by legislation or some changes that you think can help to narrow this the gap, the social exclusion gap that seems to be widening by the day?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that that communities of color, minority communities, poor communities have been hit very hard by COVID. I think part of that too has been misinformation and the reluctance to wear masks at times, from being given wrong information, not having recourse to find better information. I also think that where people don't have access to good health care, you'll notice now the number of cases are going up in the United States. Even they've gone up by a lot. The number of deaths are going down, it seems, on ratio, but not the case so much in poor communities, because without access to good health care, good recovery help in poor communities. So the expansion of Medicaid is something I think that was guaranteed yesterday by the Supreme Court, which is a good thing. I think they're going to side on keeping Obamacare in place, the Affordable Care Act. That's going to be helpful to poor communities. I think future President Biden working on a plan, working with governors and mayors, he says, to get PPE to poor communities is going to be helpful. A national mask mandate, without being a mandate, just like a high recommendation with the support of mayors and governors, is going to help a lot. I think something that was tried in the Bronx years ago and still going on is bringing fresh fruit and vegetable stores to poorer communities, giving tax breaks for that. I think that will help as well. Bringing good information to schools for children to be taught proper PPE wear, good health and nutrition, and just definitely the expansion of Medicaid, the expansion of healthcare is investment in all of us. People who are healthier are able to work and contribute more to society, and that builds self-esteem and building morale. And I think it's really important that we invest in those poor communities in that way. I hope that answers your question. I think that'll bring more fairness across the board. And I think that with the current administration, there's been an emphasis on tax breaks, in my opinion, for the rich, and and there hasn't been enough investment in poor areas and in communities of color. And I do think that, you know, in our society that we do need to emphasize that at a state level and a national level, both.
Mr. Boffa, someone has a question for you.
Yes.
His name is Robert Bernstein. So he's asking, thank you, Mr. Boffa. What is the title of your work and is it available on Amazon?
Yes, the title of my work, I'm going to hold it up. You can see it. I'm not good with the Zoom stuff. I hope it's right here. It's called A Letters of Gratitude to American Heroes of Social Justice. Where would we be without them? Yes, it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Okay, it talks about people in our history whose work we've benefited from in society today, and many are unaware of that because of lack of information. And it's people who fought against injustice, fought for social justice, and we are their beneficiaries today. Some people unknowingly as well. Upton Sinclair is in my book. He was, as many of you know, was one of the first truth tellers, as was Ida B. Wells, an African-American woman in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And she had a quote that's all over the internet. She's being honored now. There was a street named after her in Chicago. Her quote was, the way to fight injustice is to bring the light of truth among them. Okay, bring the light of truth on them. And that's what I think we all have to do more. Just keep bringing the light of truth on injustice and speak out. And I'd recommend that you read about her in my book or other books about her. She's fantastic. Ida B. Wells. She's a pioneer in truth telling against lynching. And she brought the truth about lynching that was happening in the United States. And it was her work that led to Senator Booker and Senator Harris to pass finally making lynching a federal crime. And it's going to be signed soon, hopefully. It hasn't been signed yet. Lynching will be a federal crime. It's more symbolic. There's not lynching today as much, obviously, but it's 100 years in coming.
Yeah. For that answer, and we will now go to a break and resume at 2:40. And when we resume, we will have the Dean of the School of Public Affairs Administration. We'll have, as well as another panel and a good number of speakers. So we look forward to that. And let us now go on to break, unless there are any final words from Dr. Akwa or any of our other distinguished speakers or panelists. Okay, so let us then go on to break, and we look forward to seeing you back at 2:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's invite Robert to give us some recap of our conversation so that at least Mr. Gordon can also understand what we did in the morning, and from there we'll turn it over to him. Go ahead. Introduce them.
Okay, I am Robert Bernstein. I have worked with CMPI for a couple of years now, quite a few years. I've worked with them in their media and in their journal. And I'm going to provide a little bit of a background to what occurred this morning, and also back it up with a couple of meetings I've had in the last couple of weeks previous to this, with stuff that I believe is pertinent to what we're discussing here today. So we had a very interesting morning. We had two journalists from Egypt who joined us. These two journalists are Fatia. Let me just get her last name. Fatia El-Dakahakani and Shakira Amin, both Egyptian journalists, and they have both explained and discussed the media situation in Egypt. The media situation in Egypt is pretty pessimistic and dark. There is very little opportunity for people to articulate the actual conditions that are going on there, so much so that when media representatives go out to cover a story, before they can even actually cover the story, they will be arrested. She gave an example of somebody that was going to cover a situation about a couple weeks ago, and she was told that the person went to the site, didn't even get out of the car, and as soon as it arrived, police were there to arrest her. Fatia indicated that the problem with media today is that there is no gatekeeper. There are no roadblocks to publish. Anybody can be a journalist, anybody can post, and that post can go viral. Thus, that becomes a situation in which a piece of material that is not factual then actually becomes something that people start to believe in. He also indicated that rules and ethics in terms of journalism have gone out the window, and that fake news that is published oftentimes is more popular and thus more widespread because it often confirms some ideas that people have. And if they see a piece of information on the internet or on social media, they will say, see, I had this idea, and look, somebody else is acknowledging my idea, and it's basically acknowledging what I'm saying. So that is a very big issue. Shakira indicated that fake news existed well before social media. It began when public media outlets supported regimes and supported causes. And there's two types of what we call untruths. One is the misinformation, which is an unintentional type of media. Sometimes it's a hoax. Sometimes it's even satire. And she mentioned something very interesting, that Biden is already appearing in cartoons in Egypt. We know that in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood is very, very much reviled. So they had a cartoon of Biden in some very religious Muslim attire that would be worn by members of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's already showing us that they are going to try to put Biden in a position where he will not be looked upon as a legitimate leader of the United States. The other type is clearly the disinformation, which is the intentional injection of information into the system to create stories that are not true. That is intentionally done by governments and by organizations to create a buzz. And this then leads to what she's called polarized societies. For people who are out there reading media, the best way to determine whether something is true or not is to basically trust your instincts. If something is outlandish, then check on who's writing it, who's placing it on the site, look at the person's track record, see what their background is about, and then say to yourself, well, perhaps this article is not exactly on point and not true. Disinformation and fake news is used very much in this moment in time to elicit emotions and lead to anger, as we are seeing in the country right now since the election ended last week. The other thing we need to do is we try to avoid isolation. We want to mix with individuals so we can discuss things. And hopefully at some point, we can move away from polarization and get into democratization of news. We also learned that specifically in Egypt, the government controls media, as it does in a number of other countries. And that media is used to create a buzz. In terms of Egypt, the individual who reads media is told that their options are, you agree with us or you're against us. There's no in between. There's no middle ground. News sites are locked. As I said, journalists are often arrested before the story is actually even written or published. And as a result of this, there's no independent media per se in Egypt. There are some independent journalists, but as a widespread trend, there are no independent journalists for publications. Readers must always question what they read and what they're presented with and say to themselves, can this be a situation that really lends itself to reality? We had another guest, an author named Justin Buffer. He indicated that there are a number of heroes that we have to look at that have been co-opted. One of them he mentioned was Martin Luther King. If you remember, over these last months, Martin Luther King was often co-opted by the administration and looked upon as a hero, when in reality, before the development of the program to put up a monument to Martin Luther King, there was a lot of resistance on Republican and conservative sides saying that, that Martin Luther King was not a proper hero and that he should not be honored. We also talked about a gentleman named Dinesh D'Souza. I know some of us have heard of him. He's a filmmaker. He's made a number of films that have been basically diatribes against Obama. He's made a movie about Hillary and her situation, and he's recently presented a film that's available, I believe, on Amazon, if I last saw it, in which he states that he's looking to try to create this situation that Trump has been not given the proper due. The interesting thing about Mr. D'Souza was that he was actually arrested and convicted of a federal felony, I believe, for some sort of campaign violations, and he would have remained in jail and not had the opportunity to make a new film. But at some point over the last couple of years, the president pardoned him, and thus he was able to get back out there in the field and continue his polemics, so to speak. We've had a public-private partnership, but at some point, we've also had situations where we have had an ongoing war or a battle against the entitlement programs that a lot of us tend to rely on, Social Security, Medicare. That began basically in the 80s with the Republican President Ronald Reagan's contract with America. It has continued up to this day. And Mr. Buffer believes that a lot of this is fake news and some of it is outlandish, because he said there's a constant drone against these two programs, that they're taking money that they don't deserve, or they're bringing down the federal government, and that we're going to end up having to expend a number of accounts in order to keep these things solvent. We have to see how that is going to play out in the administration that's upcoming. But as we were on break this afternoon, I did a little bit of research on my own, and I learned that a number of these lawsuits that have been brought against the Biden campaign or the election boards are now starting to fall by the wayside. And it's not democratically appointed judges, it is judges appointed by both sides, and they are dropping these lawsuits pretty quickly because they're finding that none of these lawsuits really have any legs to them and there's no traction. Consequently, some of these lawyers are finding out that, they can challenge 100, 1,000, even 4,000 ballots. Even with those challenged ballots, the question is, will these ballots, if they're presented to the president, create any kind of momentum so that he can overturn this election? And the answer, basically, from what I've read, is probably not. So what they're really resorting to now is demanding recounts in those states where they feel he has a little bit of energy and ability to do that. So that was basically what we heard this morning. I just wanted to add a couple of things. Last week, at the behest of Dr. Equo, I attended a meeting with Arab journalists in the Persian Gulf. It was a two-hour event in which they discussed the findings of a study they had done, where they interviewed and took opinions from Arabs living in the Persian Gulf, in the Levant, and North Africans. And some of the study findings might surprise people, but at the same point, there are some of the study findings that I don't think will surprise very many people at all. One of the things I think that people have to understand is that President Obama was not very well liked in the Gulf. People had very little regard for him. They felt that his policies in the Persian Gulf and in the Arab world were based on idealism and fantasy, and that none of those policies that he presented were able to really get anybody excited. They much preferred Trump's direct approach. They believe that the big issue for them, as I think some of us will realize, is Iran, and that the fact that Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, and basically led to the death of Soleimani, these were very much heralded by people living in those regions. On the other hand, they do not like Trump's approach towards the Palestinian question, but at the same time, they feel that after so many years of failure on a part of many presidents, they think that at this point, what they would like to see is some sort of empowerment of local leaders so that they can solve this on their own. They don't believe the United States is an honest broker, clearly because of the positions Trump has taken over the last couple of years. So they believe they would like to solve these problems on their own. And at the same time, as we all know, yesterday, Mr. Erekat, their main negotiator, passed away as a result of lung conditions from COVID. So we're basically at a holding point. As far as the relationship with Iran, most Arab governments would like to see a new tack taken by the United States. They do not want Biden to revive the JCPOA. I know some of us have heard over the last few days that Biden has talked about reviving that, and they believe that's the wrong direction. They would like to see a more comprehensive agreement or a more comprehensive effort to not only cover the nuclear bombs, but also cover missiles and the terrorism that they export through their religious groups, the Quds Force and the IRGC. They also believe that the United States has to prove itself because they feel that under Obama, we instigated a number of things and we didn't follow through. For example, Obama set a red line in Syria. He didn't follow that red line, and they are honestly believing that what occurred post that situation was led to even greater killing and greater upheaval. Another one they were very, very much upset about was the fact that we went into Libya, and then we didn't have a plan for that stability. And they also believe that some of our support programs and some of the approaches we used in Iraq were very, very faulty. So we learned quite a bit about that. And I think that President Biden or President-elect Biden is going to have to really take on some different approaches. So I believe what he's saying today is probably based on what he has right now. He has not actually been able to see any of the updated intelligence because he's been prevented from seeing that. But they certainly believe that when he does see some of that, he may change his mind and may alter some of his approaches because there is absolutely no opportunity for him to get any traction on these issues in the Middle East.
Okay, thank you very much. Edmund, I think Bob is, can you connect Bob so that he will take over the panel? But I guess Honorable Gordon you can launch him on, then later on the Dean will speak. But hand over you can introduce Honorable Gordon,
Sure.
then you pass it on to Bob Schick.
Sure. So it is a pleasure to introduce Richard Gordon. Richard Gordon is a trusted advisor to leaders around the world, and he'll provide us with a special address. During a more than 35-year career, Mr. Gordon has advised candidates and office holders in every position, from president to municipal council. And by president, I'm referring to the President of the United States. He is, among other roles, a longtime advisor to the board chair of the Democratic Governors Association. Mr. Gordon has importantly maintained a commitment to protect and defend human rights, serving as president and later chair of the American Jewish Congress. It might also be worth mentioning on a personal note that I have known Mr. Gordon since childhood and am honored to call him a friend and a mentor. Mr. Gordon, the floor is yours.
Edmund, thank you very much. It's a special pleasure to be introduced by you. So thank you. You have been a family friend for a very long time. And I think some of your friends are watching today. So thank you for doing this. And thank you for the kind introduction as always. It's a pleasure being here with all of you and being part of this very impressive symposium. So my congratulations to the organizers, to the Center for Media and Peace Initiatives and the Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration, who put together this conference to discuss such an important and timely issue as the media and democratic governance. While thinking about what I was going to say today, I was thinking about just talking about outside influences on American politics, outside groups, and not talking about any one specific individual. But as I thought about it more, I realized that that would perhaps ignore the biggest driver in this whole discussion. So I will speak about Donald Trump and the effect that his disinformation campaign has had on this election and on the American psyche. My purpose is not to be partisan, but rather to just give a more complete picture of what has gone on. And I realize that there is some irony here that I can feel compelled to tell you that I'm not going to give you disinformation before giving a speech about disinformation. So I hope you'll understand. So let's just start. Look, Donald Trump was reelected. COVID-19 is a hoax. Global warming doesn't exist. Everything I just said was a lie. Nothing was true. None of those statements have any validity. It doesn't matter how loud I say it. It doesn't matter how big my microphone is. It doesn't matter how many followers I have, and it doesn't matter what my title is. What I just said was a lie, all three of those statements. But there are lies like these that are being repeated over and over and over with a dangerous and dramatic effect. When lies get into the body politic, they make the system sick. They pervert and corrupt the system. If not remedied, they will kill the body itself. That is the threat that is facing America and the world today. Just like one of my favorite movies, The Terminator, where computers take over the world and become self-aware and ultimately destroy it. Technology has become so sophisticated that the general public cannot tell truth from fiction. They can't tell what's real and what is a distortion of the truth. And that is the way our adversaries and the adversaries of democracy want it to be. Domestic and foreign adversaries of our democratic system have consciously been spreading lies in order to damage and alter our political system. As a nation, we have lived through hot wars like World War II, we've lived through the Cold War, but now we're living through something else. We're living through the disinformation wars. As a country, we were able to defeat our enemies in the first two battles. I am not as confident, I am not as sure that we will succeed in our current battle to defeat this enemy. Foreign organizations have been doing this overseas for many, many years. We have seen how destabilized governments and elections around the world have been created by disinformation campaigns. For example, Cambridge Analytica, the disgraced British firm, was using stolen information on voters to influence elections in India, Australia, Kenya, and the United Kingdom. And this is a very typical technique to use disinformation like this. They rely on media stories based on hacked emails and some out-and-out forgeries to create unsubstantiated stories, which then discredit candidates and sway elections. State-sponsored foreign actors like Russia, China, and Iran have, according to the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known as CISCA, which is a division of the Department of Homeland Security, been associated with the spreading of election-related disinformation. Their purpose is not usually to destroy the campaigns or defeat any specific individual. That's not their real goal. Their real goal and their purpose is significantly broader. It is to sow seeds of mistrust in the American political system so that voters won't trust the system itself, thereby damaging the American electoral process and weakening our government. We're all rather familiar with Russia's attempts to influence the 2016 American presidential elections, so I won't spend much time going into that now or rehashing those stories. But in the 2020 election, the actors trying to undermine the American electoral process and confidence in our government has grown beyond Russia to include China and, most significantly, as I mentioned, Iran. Fortunately, Siska was able to identify and dismantle much of Russia and Iran's attempts to influence our elections this year. Well, much has gone on the international front to disrupt the US elections. By far, the vast majority of activities to disrupt the US elections came from sources within the United States itself. As the nonpartisan group Election Integrity Partnership has noted, the greatest number of disinformation campaigns during the 2020 election came from right-wing domestic groups and conspiratorial media outlets, as opposed to foreign groups whose purpose was to destroy confidence in the American election system generally. These groups were significantly more targeted, going after specific candidates and creating doubt about the voter system itself. Their hope was that by creating doubt over the mail-in process, which of course was necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic, they would suppress turnout and thereby alter the election's outcome. And the leader of this disinformation campaign was none other than Donald Trump, President of the United States. Trump didn't invent lying, he just perfected it. I guess Cain invented lying when he lied to God about his brother Abel, but that's another story. For a vast majority of his public life, Mr. Trump has engaged in lies and falsehoods. His pre-presidency history is marked by the same patently untrue statements stated over and over and over again with no basis and no proof. He is well remembered in New York for accusing 5 Black youths for a vicious attack and rape of a young white jogger in Central Park. All 5 of these people have since been exonerated. We all remember his campaign well before he was running for president, saying that Barack Obama was not an American citizen since he was born in Kenya, according to Mr. Trump, and therefore couldn't legally serve as president. This is even after President Obama produced his birth certificate. Presumably, Donald Trump knows that the information that he is disseminating is not true. However, he continues to do it. The Washington Post and other journalists have kept a running list of his untruths since he became president. They have stated that he has made at least 22,247 false or misleading claims since taking office, and this is of August of this year. Since then, the lie meter has been off the charts, and many organizations have stopped counting since it's just too difficult for them to do so. Trump, perhaps uniquely, seems to have intuitively realized that the public doesn't mind him lying. They don't seem to care, at least a large segment of the public. In an earlier time, lying was disqualifying, and numerous candidates saw their careers crashing down around them for lying about various things. Not Donald Trump, though. Lying is part, actually, of his political calculus. Trump realizes that his lies serve a very useful purpose for him. They create what I have come to call the cycle of disinformation. He lies about something. Right-wing news sources and bloggers then continue the lie and sometimes offer supporting bogus information. And then the mainstream media picks it up. They either do so because they don't realize it's a lie, or perhaps to discredit it. At that point, the president screams fake news and the cycle continues. How much time was spent by the mainstream media telling us that the Hunter Biden story was a lie? However, each time they aired that same story, even though they said it wasn't true, even though they told us it has been debunked, how often does that seep into our minds and create doubt by voters about the Biden family? Sometimes Trump is not the beginner of the cycle. He's sometimes in the middle of the cycle. So there have been many times during his presidency where he has been an advocate in the middle of the cycle of disinformation instead of its originator. Often, the source of his lies are from his favorite media sources, such as Fox News and others, or from other extremist groups. He then repeats the false story, which continues the cycle. And an example of this as you may remember, is when a right-wing group posted an altered video, an interview with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in which she appeared to either be drunk or perhaps had a stroke. Trump repeated it often. He mentioned it repeatedly, continuing the lie that there was something wrong with the speaker. The media then picked up the story that the President of the United States was referring to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the third highest elected person in the country, as being from a obviously doctored video in their attempts to debunk the story. But this led the president to simply say that the media's coverage of that was fake. This led to the story being heard by millions of more people than it would have if it was simply issued by the original group and not picked up by anyone else. These groups don't have the power, the resources, the viewership, or the ability to reach even a fraction of the people who ultimately learned about this story. Trump understands the power of his megaphone and knows that he can plant these falsehoods more firmly in the public's mind because of his power to communicate. He understands that the media will magnify the reach of his words and retweets of fallacious material far wider than the original group could ever do on their own. This enables far-right, conspiracy, and other groups to piggyback off of legitimate media sources to disseminate their falsehoods. Trump uses disinformation intentionally to achieve the goals he's trying to achieve. His attacks on the mail-in ballots is simply an example, and the latest one, or the greatest one perhaps. For weeks, he has been railing against mail-in ballots, saying that they produce fraudulent elections. However, there's absolutely no evidence of this. In fact, both Republican and Democratic officials have stated that there's absolutely no evidence of widespread voter fraud in this year's election. Even the postal worker who claimed that he had seen fraudulent ballots recanted his story today as well. There are numerous states in the United States that have shifted to mail-in ballots totally and have been doing so successfully for many years. In states with mail-only ballot elections, such as Oregon and Colorado, there have been no prosecutions for vote tampering for many years. The U.S. Justice Department, which the president controls, did not bring any major voter fraud cases in the 4 years of his presidency. Surely, if there was a massive voter fraud going on in this country, his own Attorney General, Bill Barr, would have vigorously prosecuted such activities. The fact that he didn't speaks volumes and tells you about the absence of voter fraud in the United States. In fact, interestingly, the only major voter fraud case that was prosecuted in the United States during the Trump presidency concerned a Republican candidate for Congress in North Carolina. The election ultimately had to be thrown out because the Republican won and the election was tainted. President Trump's goal, of course, throughout this whole process is to sow seeds of doubt in the public's mind prior to Election Day. What he's trying to do is cast doubt on the validity of the election itself. That way, when the returns were not favorable to him, he had already created significant doubt with the electorate on whether the outcome should be believed. This doubt is only amplified by the media, who cover his lies, creating more doubt in the electoral process. At the very same time President Trump was engaging this activity, right-wing groups were telling people that election by mail leads to fraudulent results, that it was too dangerous to go vote, and even giving people the wrong date of the election and incorrect procedures of how to send in their ballot so that their ballots would be invalidated and thrown out. They used the thrust of Trump's message itself to achieve the same goal: suppress the vote. That is why they targeted swing states and minority communities with their suppression tactics in an attempt to lessen the votes by those groups and in those places. And why was suppressing the vote so important? Well, if you look back at 2016, you'll realize that Donald Trump won the presidency by the narrowest of margins. Suppressing the vote in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania this year was viewed as perhaps the only way for him to win. Making sure that people didn't vote, hopefully Biden voters, would make it possible for President Trump to squeeze through yet again. And it almost worked. However, even with these activities by President Trump, groups in support of him, and other organizations, Biden still won Wisconsin by more than 225,000 more votes than Trump received in 2016. And he carried Michigan by at least 10 times the margin that Trump did 4 years earlier. This reverberating message between the President of the United States and fringe, ultra-conservative, and conspiratorial groups has seeped into the minds of thousands of voters, enabling them to believe that these outlandish and often repudiated stories are true. QAnon, a far-right conspiracy theory that promotes many of these ideas, largely believed and repeated often the bizarre belief that Hillary Clinton was involved in child pornography because her staff used the initials CP, meaning to them, cheese pizza. But the group let it be known that CP actually was shorthand for child pornography. From there, QAnon has grown to incorporate many other discredited ideas, such as that the coronavirus is a hoax. One of its followers, who you may remember is known as QAnon Karen, was so fraught with the belief that the corona was a hoax that she destroyed a mask display in a local Target because she felt that the hoax was killing the country and she had to destroy the masks in order to help save it. You know, a president's words have meaning. And in the case of the current occupant of the White House, have an almost cult-like following where people believe anything he says. When he says that COVID is a hoax or that the election was stolen, it frays the very fabric of the country and is outright dangerous. But it doesn't have to be like this, and it wasn't always like this. Sure, there have been dirty tricks and false accusations in politics for time immemorial. However, this is different. Technology makes this different. In the not so far past, Americans received their news either from their local newspapers or one of 3 network news programs. That's it. That's all they had access to. That's the only way they knew what was going on. They didn't have literally thousands of news outlets, each struggling to fill their 24-hour news slots with something that passes for information. The evening news that most Americans received was limited to 15 minutes a night. And then the 15 minutes was expanded to 30 minutes. If you read it in the newspaper or heard it on the evening news, well, you didn't have to question its validity. It was true. It was gospel. In fact, if someone questioned you, you could safely reply, wait a minute, I heard it on the news, and they would believe you because that is how we decided what was true. One of the major reasons that Americans turned against the war in Vietnam was because Walter Cronkite, the anchor of the CBS Evening News at the time, who was often dubbed the most trusted man in America, told us that we were losing the war. Can you imagine if a news anchor said something like that today? The President of the United States would automatically shoot it down as fake, and a large segment of the population would believe him. They would believe him, not the media, not other voices, not elected officials even. They would believe President Trump because he said so. On top of all this, you have tech giants like Facebook and Twitter, who are allegedly, and I believe are neutral parties who don't profess to have a political bias. But they are being hijacked by far-right groups. As long as tech organizations place the right of anyone to post anything they want on their platforms, regardless of its veracity, they are complicit in the spread of disinformation. They have been extraordinarily slow to accept responsibility and make changes to thwart the activities of those who want to use them to spread disinformation. I've often asked friends of mine in the media why they continue to cover the president when it's just so obvious that he is lying. They tell me that since he is the president, they basically have no choice and they have to cover him regardless. And it is not for them to make the judgment of whether he is speaking the truth or not. It is for the audience, for the listeners, the viewers, the readers. However, that is not ultimately fair or accurate because of the power of the media itself, whichever form it takes, to influence public opinion, they have more responsibility than others. Their power to influence public opinion is so great that they need to take more responsibility to ensure that the public does not receive disinformation and falsehoods. For the first time in his presidency, just last week, news outlets refused to cover his press conferences and those of his press secretary when they were lying about the outcome of the recent election, when he claimed that if only the legitimate votes were counted, that he would win. Numerous networks cut away from their coverage when he began saying those falsehoods and immediately sought to correct them. The public is in a true predicament today because they don't know what to believe. They are being bombarded with information from countless sources, and this is relentless. They are overloaded. Instead, in order to get through the noise, they choose to only listen to voices that they trust, whether that is wise or not. This creates an echo chamber where voters only get to hear what they are predisposed to agreeing with and repeat those stories as if they are true, whether they are or not, and whether they know they are or not. This has been exacerbated by the president, who constantly attacks the media, calling everything he disagrees with fake news, and even sometimes enemies of the United States. By constantly saying this, he preconditions the public to doubt whatever the media has to say. This is dangerous, and along with his attacks on other American institutions, such as the FBI and our court system, has a corrosive effect on public confidence in things they once held as sacred. It is destroying our very democracy and turning American against American. And makes one think of the words attributed to Benjamin Franklin when referring to the newly formed country, and he said, "It is a republic if you keep it." We all have a responsibility, our government, the media, tech companies, and individual citizens, to keep this republic alive. And the only way to do that is to fight against disinformation wherever it comes from, whether it comes from the President of the United States, external state actors who want to damage America by creating doubt about our institutions, or domestic terrorists who use their platforms to do the same thing to achieve their own goals. Disinformation will destroy America unless we stop it first. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bob, it's all yours.
Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Dean Charles Menefield, who is the Dean of the School of Public Affairs and Administration at Rutgers University. Dean Menefield's research interests are primarily in the areas of budgeting and financial management, public health and welfare, and minority politics. He is also a fellow in the National Academy of Public Administration. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce Dean Menefield.
Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies. I'm sorry?
I said good afternoon.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. I appreciate that. As I'm sure the situation is the same with you, you spend your whole day on video conferences, and it's no exception for me. I have never in my life met so much. It's unbelievable, to say the least. In any event, with that said, I did break off some time this afternoon to join you, and I can already see that I've missed some really nice presentations, to say the least. But before I get to that, let me thank Dr. Eckwell, Dr. Schick, Attorney Gershowitz, and then everyone else who played a role in ensuring that this conference was a success. I know that there's been a lot going on with the coronavirus, the elections, et cetera, that have probably taken us away from a lot of our normal activities. But, you know, despite the plague of the virus, we continue. So I'm also very, very ecstatic to see that the level of the conversations is still at a very high level. I remember participating in this conference 2 years ago and thinking, man, I cannot believe we don't have more people hearing this. Like this, and I distinctly remember the one presentation on human trafficking. It was the best presentation I'd ever heard in a 30-year career. And I was just left dumbfounded, to say the least. And the following year we met in New York, and the level of the presentation was still very high, and they continue to be high today. Very important topics covered. It's on information. I think, Mr. Gordon, yours is the first one I've heard all the way through. Very interesting and very enlightening, and I think we all agree with many of the things that you've said, so good job. I look forward to hearing the rest of the presentations, and thank you for having me. Sorry for interjecting right in the middle. I didn't know that I was going to be right in the middle of a series of presentations. I would have preferred to wait to the end, but nonetheless, we're here where we are. Thank you.
Okay, this is Bob Schick again, and I would like to introduce the next speaker, the Most Reverend Manuel A. Cruz, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Newark.
Great. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. As Auxiliary Bishop, yes, I was ordained 2008 here in Newark. And I've been working in the Archdiocese of Newark my entire priesthood. I'm sure by now you can pick up an accent. I was born in Cuba, and I came to this country in 1966 with my mother and father. I have worked for decades the crossroads of human services, ethics, and social justice. It is truly a pleasure to address you today at the 8th Annual Gershowitz Conference. I had to thank very much the Center for Media and Peace Initiative, Rutgers University, and the Institute of Global Affairs for their leadership on this issue. My friends, religious freedom is one of the most important matters before us. And it's great that the phone is ringing. Thank God it's in our mind.
Sorry, Father.
Great. I love it. And you did a great job, by the way. You were excellent, all right? So I had to read this because I'm a little nervous. So religious freedom truly is one of the most important matters before us. In nations where religious freedom is respected and appreciated, innovation grows vigorously and stability prevails. My friends, religious freedom releases the spiritual capital of any country, serving thereby as a gateway to economic opportunity and the fulfillment of every individual's own potential. Sadly, religious freedom is violated in many parts of the globe. Individuals do face discrimination, intimidation, and even confinement because of their faith. Evangelization by religious minorities is oftentimes outloaded. In some regions of the world, the Bible and other sacred texts are banned. Cemeteries of religious minorities are often desecrated. Religious instruction, catechesis, is all but impossible. We think of Western Asia, especially Iran, our fellow Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Zoroastrians, and Sunni and Sufi Muslims, whose religious freedom is grossly infringed upon. We also think of China and the notorious subjugation of Buddhism, China has also habitually repressed Christians, liquidating churches and apprehending followers. My central point to you today is straightforward. When individuals are free to practice their faith, communities win, nations win, stability prevails. I'd like to end by a little anecdote of my own life. As a child, I'm Catholic, and I received the sacraments in Cuba. It was in the underground church at the time. I received the sacraments in a pharmacy taught by a nun, a daughter of charity of St. Vincent de Paul, a heroic woman, who I simply went to her and I said, I'd like to receive my first Holy Communion. And this wonderful religious said, well, it's not possible, but I could bring you into the pharmacy, and there you will receive the instructions. And I was the only one who received communion that year. And that experience touched me so deeply that to this very day, I think of this wonderful religious. I kept in contact with her until her death. And this great community of women, just 2 days ago, I received a picture from 1918 during the Spanish pandemic, the global pandemic of the Spanish flu. And there were daughters of charity caring for the sick and the dying. So for me, I've been a priest for over 40 years. I've always been close to the sick, the dying, and also trying to be a voice so that those who are discriminated and those who are treated unjustly and those who are separated from their families, that this has to end. This has to end. We are all God's children. We are loved with a love that has no conditions. And this conference gives me an opportunity for me to express my voice and to say, let's continue on the fight. Good people out there who need our support, encouragement, and they need our voice. I want to end also now really, and which is very touching because of the conversations I've heard so far. When I came to this country, I've always had to be grateful to President Johnson. He welcomed the Cubans in 1966. And I could cry because on that day when I came to America, I was given a green card. I became legal immediately, and my parents were able to work in factories. I wanted to say that for years, I never understood the great gift that I received on that day, on that September 5th, 1966, to be able to come to a country of freedom and a country that welcomed me. And now that I'm 66 years old, there's hurts of, I see so many young men and women of Central and South America and from all over the world who would love to have the same thing, the same gifts that I received, and it has not been possible. Because the message of the Christian message, the gospel is, we are all children of God, and we all have to be treated with equality and respect, and true respect. So, gracias. Me siento muy contento de estar con ustedes. I need to say those words. I have to be grateful. That comes from the heart. And thank you for giving me this time to be with you.
Is it all right to go ahead and ask?
Sure. Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Sí, con mucho gusto, señor.
This is my real background, by the way.
So is mine. I'm just gonna put two questions out there to the panel and to whomever wants to take them. The first question here, and this was something I asked this morning, and I'd like to hear some more responses. We seem like we're in a period of time in this country right now where education has become devalued, and this is a bit of a concern to me because as we devalue education, we're going to have less and less people able out there to discern what is real and what is not real, what we were talking about earlier today. So my concern is this a real concern that I have, or is this something I'm maybe being hyperbolic about? And if it is a real concern, how do we prevent it? That's my first. And my second is, we know Trump was a leader of this movement to create this disinformation and create this disruption. Disruption is now something that we see happening in a lot of fields. Disruptors are often put in there to try to change things in a very, very bold and direct manner. My concern is the next Trump person, the next Trumper or the next leader who is at the head of this new movement, which is clearly a movement now. Trumpism is a movement that's out there and it's going to last for a while. My concern is the next guy is not going to be as outlandish and as clownish and as less polished as Trump. Should we be concerned that this guy is going to be more polished, more savvy, more of a media-ready person, so he's going to be able to do much more damage? So those are my two questions.
I'm not exactly sure who that was to, but I'm happy to start.
I put both of those questions out to the panel, whoever wants to take them on.
Let me just say a couple things, if I may. I have always viewed Donald Trump as a mirror. I don't consider him the cause. I don't consider him the leader of the movement. I almost wish he were. I think that there are other actors that have been in play for a long time. I think he, this is not a word you might hear frequently, brilliantly figured out a way to co-opt this and lead this. And I think he realized that there was significant pain in the country and that there was a way to exploit it for his own purposes, which he did. I am deeply concerned about education in this country. I'm deeply concerned that people do not understand the background of the country, the reasons that Father Cruz came to this country in the first place, and how it is a beacon of hope, and how that's a country that's meant to be open to all. I'm deeply concerned that people do not understand and are not educated anymore to understand all of these things. And I think that's a problem. We have to figure out a way to make sure that people have a better understanding of the country that we live in. So those are a couple of things that bother me. As far as the future and someone more savvy or whatnot, you know, I think there are a lot of insidious forces in the country right now. And clearly someone will at some point rise up and ride those forces as a demagogue to try to achieve and accomplish power. And that's something that we have to be conscious of. And I think your comments about education and whatnot are very important, because that is how we make sure that the population understands the issues and therefore can battle against them.
So let me just ask a quick question. What, in your opinion, do you think is the incentive for a certain political leader to continue to lie and somehow doesn't even, because it's not, most politicians do lie, that's the truth. But previously, when a politician is caught lying, it's either the person apologizes or does some correction course or something. But these days, people lie, they will never accept it. And it's like the dogma is never accept you're wrong. So what, is it because somehow someone doesn't pay a price for it? Or what in your opinion is the incentive? Why is it that this situation is the way it is? Why it continues to go this way? But there's a profit someone is getting, that's why they continue to do it.
Well, there are no ramifications for it, right? You're talking about someone who said that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and no one would care. So I assume if there were greater political ramifications, then then perhaps he would change his behavior. Look, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't really talk about the person himself and the condition that has led him to act like this. But I can talk about it from a political point of view, and that is simply that he understands that he could rally a certain group of people and that they are going to believe him no matter what he says. And so it is in his best interest to do this. And by causing doubt about our structure and our system and the truth, it gives him more power and more runway to do what he wants to do. I think if he were a more conventional politician, I don't think he would have won the 2016 election. You know, it's interesting. I learned something very important a few days after the 2016 election. I was having lunch with a friend and she brought her son. And his comment, he was in his mid-20s, his comment was, I found this fascinating. Everyone lies to us. Everyone lies to us. We live in a world where everyone lies to us, because I was aghast. I mean, like, how could you vote for someone who you know is lying to you? And his comment was, it's my job to figure out who lies and who doesn't lie. And that's what I have to do. I assume they're going to lie. I have to go through it and figure out what's important and what's not. And this goes, I think, to Mr. Bernstein's comment, which is that if people are not educated sufficiently to listen to someone and understand that they're not telling them the truth, then that's a serious problem. But what's really fascinating about this is that even when they know he's lying, they don't seem to care. And I don't have a better answer for why we don't care, why we as society doesn't care. I do understand why he continues, because it is in his best interest and it gives him attention, which is something I think he craves.
Another question goes to the bishop, really, because why I'm directing it to him is, since he's in the ecclesiastical realm, because I've also had conversations with like the evangelical Christians. Part of the argument they bring is we're voting for a president, not a pope. And that may make sense in a way, but like Honorable Gordon talked about Cain inventing lie into the world. Actually, I never thought about it until he said it. So you are in the ecclesiastical realm. How will you explain the evangelical world that somehow coalesces with something that is apparently dishonest, but someone can become dishonest because the person is not a pope, but a president? The question is to the bishop.
Very good question. A very good question, and probably I will not give you the answer. Okay, these are very scary times, and I'm honest. But I want to go back to the very important statement: the truth will make us free, and that comes from the Bible. The truth will make us free, and the truth is found in many ways. But as I've heard already, the whole element of education. The world, I mean, there are many men and women, the future of the church, the future of our country, the future of our society is rooted on people who are very committed for service and service with knowledge. So the truth will make us free. We need to educate our future generations. And we had to teach by our example. Ultimately, and one of the reasons I'm standing here today is because of the whole ministry of service. Service to the poor, service to the people who are in need. I wanted to also bring up another, a doctor of the church, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Teresa of Jesus, a woman who lived in the 16th century, and she was a great reformer. And she was almost burned at the stake by the Inquisition. So the church was tough with her, but she was a very bright woman. And she said, we have to not be afraid to speak the truth. We cannot let go, and we have to persevere. And I think this forum that we're experiencing today, what we do ultimately is for us to proclaim the truth. The truth, not only the way we know it, the way we have learned it, that is rooted in love, compassion, understanding, and realizing that all of us are included. This whole inclusion is so important for me. I mean, for years I served at Sacred Heart Cathedral. And somebody said, it's a beautiful building. I said, yeah, it's beautiful, but it's really beautiful when the doors are opened and when everyone said, please welcome, this is home for you. So this whole element of discrimination has to go for me beyond papers. And I read it, it's something that it was written and I said my words and I will be done. But when I see discrimination and injustice, it's unacceptable. And I think the first question is so important, the whole idea about education and our future generations that have to be well-formed. And obviously, not only lying, but transparency is so important. Transparency. And the key word for me today for all of you is perseverance. I have not said anything new to you today. You know the answer. Everyone knows the answer. But the bottom line is we cannot let go. In the medical world, there is a physician that I have an incredible respect, Dr. Schwartz, a great dermatologist and a dear friend of mine, and Dr. Peter Carmel from University Hospital here in Newark. People who have worked hard and people who have done extremely well in their profession. But ultimately, they have been men of service. And service is everything. I think we're spending this afternoon together in Zoom meetings and everybody is doing many things, but ultimately we want to challenge everyone about service. I know that I didn't answer the question, but at least I gave my little homily again and again. And I am for education, big time, big time. I wish I had a better education myself. I would be speaking better English by now.
Okay.
Any other questions? Does anybody wants to know about Saint Teresa of Avila? She was a tough lady. She was Jewish. And her father was Jewish. And the Inquisition was after her. But she said, we have to do the right thing. And we have to be honest in our vocation.
Actually, the comment I want to make, because I'm just reflecting on Mr. Gordon's speech, and I remember one of the foundation board members of CMPI. His name is Dr. Michael Shotson. He is of Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. So sometime, I think in 2011 or so, there was this project he embarked with the editor of Washington Post about reconstruction of American journalism. If you ask me, I just think that, I know the First Amendment is there and other issues and all that, but with what is going on, I have a feeling that it is very timely to think very seriously about that document about reconstruction of American journalism, because a whole lot of things are at play right now. I also remember even in 1947, Henry Luce, when he launched the publisher of time, when he launched a similar commission, Hutchins Commission, that was able to look at journalism in entirety. That actually brought about the social responsibility theory of the media. I think the time has really come with all these cacophony of noise and confusion and all that, because the definition of truth has become so difficult to bear, because even when some people, like Gordon said, somebody will say, oh yeah, everybody lies. Therefore, if everybody lies, therefore it should continue. So it's really a big challenge to all of us. And as opinion molders, I think the media do have a central role to play in this. But in a situation where you watch one channel, for example, and watch the other, you wonder whether you're still in the same country. It's really a big challenge. So while we're also discussing that, because it's not just even the media, even media consumers also are culpable. They also have a role to play, you know. And like the other CNN contributor said in the morning, confirmation bias. Sometimes we read something and we think this must be fake, and yet we still go ahead to spread it. And they're like, one other thing Gordon said that also amused me, that I've also thought about that. How can we not stop covering some of these lies when we know it is a lie? Yeah, the journalist will tell you, well, you know, it's a marketplace of ideas. You want to, you know, push all the opinion, people should make their judgment. But I think today, journalists should help the consumers, you know, in shaping their opinion in a rightful way. It's not as if we're sanctimonious or journalists should know everything, but I think that in obvious cases, just like they did recently, you pointed it out, Mr. Gordon, in terms of cutting off some press conferences that they believe is misleading, you know. So I think something should continue until, you know, because we cannot reward dishonesty. Because the sad thing about all this is just like Tom Friedman of New York Times, prior to the election, part of the thing he was saying is that his problem was not necessarily about Trump winning the election, but if he wins the election, what message are we sending to the entire world? In other words, if he made a mistake in 2016 and we re-elect him, then we have validated his behavior and all the things he's doing. And that would be a terrible stain on the image of the United States internationally. So I reckon with that, you know, and we can also share views on this, you know. If there are other comments, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I really appreciate the sentiments and the comments shared by all of us. And at the end of the day, we'll package all these things and put them in a narrative form so that people will, I also understand that, if there are people who are hooked on audio, they can also send their questions on the chat forum, or if you want to talk, you can also indicate your entry. Other than that, Bob, it's all yours.
Thank you.
I think we've had a very productive day, and we've covered a lot of issues. I mean, not only, you know, related to COVID, relating to disinformation, government, nonprofit, journalism, when we had two journalists from Egypt here. And, you know, we got to see from the journalists in Egypt how there is really no freedom of the press there at all, the way they were portraying. And they are really under significant pressure in how they write their stories and what they say. I think whoever's phone that is. And I think for me, even with all the things that are going on, there's still an appreciation of what the United States is and what it represents. I mean, there are real threats to our country, and we're in the throes of that. And we have to be extremely vigilant, and what can we each do as we go forward? So, Uchenna, do you want to conclude today's session and then we'll reconvene tomorrow, or is there more you want to do today?
No, really. I think we've had a very productive day, like you said. I was excited learning some of these issues in the morning, and also listening to Congressman Klein. You know, I found his presentation very fascinating, especially in the context of the struggle in Washington today. We were able to tap from his experience where he was congressman. And, you know, we were also able to connect that with what's also happening around the world. And I really also thank Mr. Gordon for also his insightful paper. I'm sure we also like to, you know, get copies of that. And we're going to publish this. Even it's going to be on YouTube as well. And I also want to thank the Dean for making our time to join us. The Bishop, with all your commitments, I really thank you so much. Bob, thanks a lot. Dr. Olga, enjoying the creative experience which we shared in the morning. And of course, Robert, thanks a lot. And more thanks to the indefatigable Edmund Jiniga. So he's been so wonderful in helping to, package all these things. He's so tech savvy. Some of us who belong to the old generation somehow we are learning all these new devices, but for him, he's like papa, So Edmund, thank you so much. You want to say a few words? Otherwise, I'll thank all of you for joining us. Edmund, you want to say something?
I just wanted to thank also join Dr. Equo and the entire Center for Media and Peace Initiatives, and thanking all the speakers today for a wonderful, wonderful session. And we look forward to having to reconvening soon, I guess tomorrow in a couple hours.
Thank you, the Dean. You were not there when I was thanking you. Thank you so much for your support.
Okay, and I promise prayers to all of you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Yes, absolutely.
Needed. And you know what? A word we ought to leave with a word of hope always.
Yeah,
things get better. All things shall pass, and God is with us. Okay.
Amen. Amen. The Manifest, do you want to say one or two words?
No, I heard what you said. My phone rang and it was somebody I needed to chat with for a second. But no, I heard what you said, and I am always most appreciative. There's a real intersection between journalism and public policy, public administration, and I think these kinds of conversations really bring that to life. So I'm looking forward to the conversations tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
Take care.
You're welcome. All right. Greet say.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay.